The clock said the game was slipping away. Brazil needed something. And the manager turned to a 19-year-old who hadn't started a single match at this World Cup. A kid most of the country had already started to doubt. He came on, and he scored the winning goal. Again. Afterward, asked how he stayed ready while sitting and waiting, he didn't talk about tactics or fitness. He said something stranger. I had this sense of urgency, as if he already knew the moment was coming for him, as if he'd known his whole life. And a Swiss psychologist who died 25 years before Endrick was born spent his entire career trying to explain exactly where that kind of certainty comes from. To understand this, you have to start where he started. And it's nothing like a fairy tale. Endrick was born in 2006 in a working-class corner of Brasilia. His family had almost nothing. His parents sold food outside a metro station to survive. His father worked as a cleaner, at one point sweeping the stands of a stadium, the very kind of place his son would one day fill. Years later, Endrick described it in one sentence that tells you everything. I never went hungry, but my parents did. They starved for me. That's the foundation, not talent. Sacrifice. A debt paid in advance by people who believed in a future they couldn't yet see. And the boy carried that belief like it was already a fact. Carl Gustav Jung was born in Switzerland in 1875. He became Sigmund Freud's most brilliant disciple, and then his greatest rival. Freud believed the unconscious mind was basically a basement, a dark storage room full of repressed trauma, buried urges, things we'd rather forget. Jung looked at that and said, it's far bigger than that. Underneath your personal unconscious, your memories, your fears, your private wounds, there is a deeper layer. One you didn't build. One you were born with. He called it the collective unconscious, a kind of inherited memory of the entire human species, shaped across hundreds of thousands of years. And it was the idea that ended his friendship with Freud and made him one of the most important minds of the 20th century. Inside that collective unconscious, Jung said, live the archetypes, universal patterns that show up in every culture, every era, every mythology, without anyone teaching them to each other. The mother, the sage, the trickster, the shadow, and the one that matters most for this story, the hero. Jung believed some people are born with an unusually strong connection to a single archetype, and when that happens, those people don't seem to be merely living their lives. They seem to be fulfilling something. Not because they're following a script, but because they're plugged into something that existed long before they did. Watch enough of these people, and you stop seeing ambition. You start seeing inevitability. Endrick is one of those people. By 14, Palmeiras, one of Brazil's biggest clubs, already knew they had something rare. At 16, he made his professional debut. And before he'd even turned 17, Real Madrid, the biggest club on earth, agreed to pay a €60 million release clause for a teenager who couldn't legally sign until he turned 18. 60 million for potential, for a promise. But here is the detail Jung would have caught instantly. Through all of it, the hype, the money, the impossible expectations, the boy never once seemed unsure of where he belonged. Not nervous, not overwhelmed, certain. Jung said the true hero archetype doesn't need outside validation to know who it is. The certainty comes from inside, from a connection to something larger than the individual ego. The hero in Jung's psychology is not the invincible Superman. It's something far more specific. It's the one born in an ordinary place, who feels from a young age that he belongs to something greater, who faces trials that should break him, and emerges transformed. Not in spite of the hardship, but because of it. The crises don't exist to destroy the hero. They exist to reveal him. And almost on cue, Endrick walked straight into his first real trial. He arrived at Real Madrid in 2024, and the magic didn't come. He sat on the bench, then on the bench behind the bench. Under Carlo Ancelotti, the minutes barely came at all. The Spanish press, which had crowned him months earlier, started to turn. Too soon? Was the hype too big? His own manager publicly told him, in so many words, to be patient and earn it. For a teenager who had been the most important player everywhere he'd ever been, this was the wilderness. And this is exactly where most prodigies are quietly destroyed. Not by an opponent, but by the silence, by being forgotten. Stars on the bench get bitter. They sulk. They demand to leave. The connection to the dream flickers and dies. Jung had a word for what was really being tested here: individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your most complete self. And Jung was emphatic about one thing: individuation is never a straight line. It is not a steady climb on a graph. It is full of collapses, crises, long stretches where everything appears to be going wrong. And it is precisely in those stretches that the hero archetype reveals itself with the most force. Not at the top, when it meets the shadow, the dark, rejected, frightening part of the self that every person must eventually face. Endrick met his shadow on a bench in Madrid. And he didn't break. He just kept showing up, kept scoring when he was finally given minutes. Not because he suddenly became good, but because he had never stopped being good. And the proof was already on tape, written before the Madrid struggle even began. At 17, Endrick was called up to the senior Brazil team, the youngest since Ronaldo in 1994. In March 2024, on his first big stage, he scored the winning goal against England at Wembley, becoming the youngest player ever to score at that stadium. 3 days later, he scored again against Spain, in Madrid, in the very city that would soon make him wait. A boy announcing, on the biggest stages in the world, that this was where he belonged, while the doubters were still warming up their arguments. There's another layer here that's impossible to ignore, and it's pure Jung. He said the hero archetype almost always carries the collective weight of a people. It's not just one person's story. It's the story of everyone who came before and didn't make it. Endrick carries that very literally. He carries the hopes of a Brazilian football culture that, after a humiliating exit at the 2022 World Cup, was desperate for a new symbol, someone to believe in again. A country in an identity crisis. And a teenager from nothing walked onto the world stage and behaved as if carrying that weight was simply what he was born to do. Jung would call that synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that isn't coincidence at all. The hero appears when the collective needs him. Brazil needed one. Endrick arrived, but Jung also left a severe warning about the hero archetype. And this is the part nobody making highlight reels wants to say out loud. The hero's greatest enemy is never the external villain. It's inflation of the ego. The moment the hero starts to believe he is bigger than the archetype he carries, when he confuses the role with the person. Football history is a graveyard of players who had everything it took to be immortal and were destroyed, not by an opponent, but by themselves. By the weight of being the chosen one, by the inability to survive their own symbol. The gift is heavy. Most who carry it that young get crushed underneath it. So here's the difference Jung would point to. The true hero, the one genuinely connected to the archetype, not just performing it, has what you could call structural humility. Not the fake modesty of pretending you're not good. The deeper kind, knowing the gift was never really yours, that you are only the channel for it. Listen to how Endrick talks, about his parents who starved for him, about his faith, about the process. And you hear it. He doesn't act like someone who discovered he was special. He acts like someone who always knew, but never forgot where he came from. For Jung, that is the single most reliable sign that the archetype will last instead of consuming the man. Which brings us back to a World Cup and a 19-year-old who isn't even starting. The world wants to measure what is still becoming. It wants numbers, consistency, a Ballon d'Or before it will take him seriously. It's the same trap as always. But the hero archetype doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in a spiral. Down, up, deeper down, higher up. And every single time the world decides Endrick is finished, he walks onto the pitch, looks at the goal, and acts on that strange certainty he's carried since he was a hungry kid in Brasilia. I had this sense of urgency. He came off the bench against Egypt and won the game. Carl Jung spent decades studying heroes, in myth, in religion, in the minds of his patients. And he reached a conclusion that sounds simple, but runs deep. The hero is not the one who feels no fear. He is the one who acts in spite of it. Because the connection to something larger than himself is stronger than any doubt. Endrick is 19. He will fail. He will have bad seasons. The press will declare the hype dead more than once. But people like this were never just playing football. Jung tried to warn us they exist, the ones who aren't chasing greatness, the ones who are quietly fulfilling something, and we almost always mistake them for kids who got lucky, right up until the moment they walk on and win the game.